Good day. My name is John T. Sachs. I'm a partner at a business called Jaltech, where we specialize in Section 12J administration and fund management. Today I'll be taking you through what is Section 12J. Section 12J is a section of the Income Tax Act and was introduced in 2009 due to various successes of similar legislation in countries like Canada, the UK, and Australia. Section 12J is effectively a tax incentive encouraging South African taxpayers to invest in Section 12J companies, and I'll explain those on the next slide. And by doing so, the investors get a tax deduction for the investment. The intention behind the legislation was to create equity funding for SMEs in South Africa. So by South African taxpayers investing into Section 12J investments or Section 12J companies, they get a tax deduction, luring them into the investment, and then the fund managers who manage the capital will then invest into South African SMEs that are compliant, that qualify in terms of Section 12J, thereby allowing or creating equity funding for SMEs. So what is a Section 12J venture capital company? So investors into Section 12J companies, or commonly termed venture capital companies, are able to or permitted to claim a tax deduction. The term venture capital in the name is a bit of a misnomer. There's no requirement for the Section 12J investment or fund to invest into venture capital, but that is the name given to it. So effectively, South African taxpayers would be investing into a normal company. They would acquire shares in this company, and they'd use the share certificate to claim their refund or the tax deduction from SARS. There are two types of Section 12J companies. There's a private company and a public company. The main distinction is that private companies cannot accept investments from the public of less than R1 million, where public Section 12J companies can, and they range between 100,000 to 500,000. The term public doesn't necessarily mean that it's a listed company, and there are no Section 12J companies that are listed currently. They are permitted to list, but they aren't. This is simply a company that has been registered with SIPC as a public company. In order to be an approved Section 12J company, you need to register with the FSCA, and you need to have approval from SARS. But effectively, one of the biggest barriers to being approved is that you need a Category 1.8 FSCA license. There are two types or forms of Section 12J companies. You get a pooled Section 12J fund and a ring-fenced. A pooled Section 12J fund is the most popular. This is where you invest into a Section 12J fund, and the fund manager will take your capital and invest it into various opportunities which meet the mandate of the fund. Where a ring-fence structure, these are uncommon, there are not many in the market. This is where a group of investors can invest into a Section 12J fund and acquire a unique share class in that fund, and then request the fund manager to invest their capital into a specific project that they may have identified. For example, if there's a startup tech business that is looking to raise capital, a group of investors can invest into a Section 12J fund. The fund will then invest into that startup tech business that they have identified. There are a number of rules restricting ring-fence structures, and these rules were introduced around the fact that allegedly there was a lot of abuse in the Section 12J market. So these rules were introduced to stamp out potential abuse, and now allow ring-fence structures still to continue to exist, but there are a number of rules which govern how they work. This slide will give you a brief visual example as to what a Section 12J structure looks like. On the top level, you have your investors, individuals, companies, and or trusts. They invest into a Section 12J company and acquire shares. They again use the share certificates to claim their tax deduction. Then you have the Section 12J venture capital company, which then takes the capital and invests into various investments. South African taxpayers who have a tax liability are inclined to invest into Section 12J funds. And when they invest, they obviously are entitled to a tax deduction. This tax deduction is upfront, and it's claimed in the year which their investment has been made. And they get a full write-off of the investment against their taxable income. And on the next slide, I'll give you a visual example of how that calculation looks. But effectively, by investing into a Section 12J fund, you can write off your investment against your taxable income, and which effectively allows you to claim a refund or pay less tax if you're a provisional taxpayer, thereby reducing your risk capital in the fund. Because if you invest and you receive a refund of 45% of your investment, your risk capital would only be 55% of your original investment. In July 2019, Treasury introduced a cap on Section 12J. This cap prevents an individual and a trust from claiming a deduction of more than 2.5 million rand per year and 5 million for a corporate. The cap was introduced because Treasury indicated that they needed to protect the fiscus. There were some investors investing in excess of 100 million rand into Section 12J funds, and they felt that the incentive wasn't introduced to allow ultra high net worth individuals from claiming or offsetting all their tax by investing in a Section 12J fund. So a quick example, in the middle column you have an individual, their taxable income is 5 million rand, they elect not to invest in a Section 12J fund, so their taxable income will remain 5 million, and they'll be taxed just under 2.1 million rand. But if that same individual in the far right column decided to invest 2 million rand in a Section 12J fund, their taxable income will be reduced to 3 million, and therefore they'd only pay tax of just under 1.2 million. This gives this individual a tax saving of 900,000 rand, which is 45% of their investment into the Section 12J fund. If they're a PAYE payer, they will literally receive a refund of 900,000 rand from SARS. If they're a provisional taxpayer, they'll pay 900,000 rand less in tax. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop me an email. There are a number of other slides, presentations available, particularly around the tax deduction. I'll go into a lot of detail. Thank you very much.